Usually when we measure a good person, we look horizontally. We check the visible ledger.
Right, the everyday actions.
Yeah, we ask ourselves, did you hold the door for a stranger today?
Or did you donate a percentage of your paycheck to a local food bank?
Spot on. Do you avoid telling lies? The actions are clear. And society points to that horizontal ledger and says, well, there it is. That is what goodness looks like.
It is a very neat, controllable system.
It is. But today's source material takes that entire horizontal ledger and basically sets it on fire.
It really does.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am so thrilled you're pulling up a chair to be the third person in the room with us today.
We are glad you're here.
We are taking a deep dive into some staggering excerpts from Jonathan Edwards' essay, The Nature of True Virtue.
And this text is, well, it is heavy.
It is incredibly heavy. So our mission today is very specific. We are figuring out what true goodness actually is, according to this text,
Right.
and why our conventional everyday definitions of being a good person just fall completely short of actual goodness.
The logical progression here demands your absolute focus.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes concepts we assume we understand, like love, goodness, and virtue, and redefines them.
Redefines them completely.
Yeah, using an incredibly rigorous, almost geometric set of proofs. We are dealing with an author who looks at morality not as a list of nice behaviors,
Not at all.
right, but as an objective alignment with the structural reality of the universe.
And that framework totally flips modern sensibilities upside down. I mean, it is a shock to the system.
Definitely.
So let us get straight into the architecture of this argument. If we want to know what virtue is, the author anchors his whole philosophy on one massive, undeniable assertion.
The core of it all.
Yeah. He says that true virtue, at its core, consists chiefly in love to God.
But he does not just demand we accept that blindly.
No, he builds a math case. He builds it based on what he calls the primary ground of virtuous love.
And this primary ground is what he calls being simply considered.
Being simply considered. Let us slow down and look at the mechanics of that phrase. What does the text mean by being with a capital B?
Well, in this framework, being framed refers to existence itself.
Okay.
And the key is that the author treats existence as a quantifiable reality. It is a volume.
Like it takes up space.
Yeah, every single thing that exists has a specific share of existence. You have a share of existence.
The chair you are sitting on has a share.
Right. And the entire Milky Way galaxy has a massive share.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I have the mechanics of this right. Think about gravity.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Massive objects have greater gravitational pull. Jupiter has more pull than Earth.
Sure.
The sun has more pull than Jupiter. So if existence is a quantifiable reality, it acts like mass.
Yes.
And our love, our benevolence, is the gravity that naturally pulls toward mass.
That is the precise mechanism. The text argues that virtuous love or benevolence, it must be proportioned to the amount of being something possesses.
So it is a direct ratio.
It is. If virtue is having a favorable disposition toward existence, then the logical, inescapable consequence is that the being who has the greatest share of universal existence deserves the greatest share of virtuous benevolence.
Because God has infinite existence.
Infinite mass, to use your analogy.
Right, infinite mass. So he should command all the moral gravity in the room.
All of it.
Here is where the math gets terrifying for a normal human being. The text says, God has infinitely the greatest share of existence.
Infinite.
And because his share is infinite, all other being, even the entire universe combined, is as nothing in comparison.
The mathematics of virtue are absolute here. I mean, if you are supposed to distribute your love and benevolence in proportion to the amount of existence something has,
Right.
and God's existence is infinite, well then any moral system that prioritizes the finite universe over the infinite God is a mathematical failure.
It is a broken equation.
It is a complete violation of the physics of this moral universe.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the scale of this. Let us try a corporate analogy.
Okay, let us hear it.
Say you have a business where one partner owns 99.9% of the shares
Okay.
and another partner owns 0.1%. It would be absurd to give all your attention, your loyalty, and your resources to the minority shareholder.
You would be fired for gross negligence.
Exactly. I mean, spot on. But even that analogy feels too small.
It is too small. You are on the right track, but you aren't thinking big enough.
How so?
It is not 99.9% to 0.1%. It is infinity to a finite number.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is more like a partner who owns the entire company, the building, the land it sits on, the atmosphere above it, and the very concept of commerce itself.
Compared to what?
compared to a partner who owns a single rusty paperclip.
A paperclip.
Right. Giving your primary loyalty to the paperclip owner is not just poor management.
He's insane.
It's a fundamental break with reality.
So if the entire universe is as nothing compared to the divine being, how does this reframe your daily physical world?
It changes everything.
I mean, if I am walking outside looking at a beautiful mountain range or looking at my own house, the text says the existence of those things is basically zero compared to God.
Yes.
I feel like that should paralyze me.
Well, it doesn't paralyze you, but it reorients you.
How do you mean?
It completely reframes how we value our surroundings. When you walk outside and look at the stars, the natural human inclination is to be awed by the sheer size of the cosmos.
Right, we feel incredibly small.
But this text argues that being awed by the universe while ignoring the Creator is a total failure of perspective. The universe is a drop in the bucket.
So true virtue requires acknowledging the bucket, the water, and the one holding it all.
Yes. You can still appreciate the mountain, but you cannot give the mountain the moral gravity that belongs to the one who spoke the mountain into existence.
But it is not just about the sheer volume or amount of existence, is it?
No, it is not.
The text moves from the amount of being to the quality of it. And that shifts the conversation to what the author calls the secondary ground of virtuous love.
Right, so the primary ground is being simply considered, which is existence itself.
The volume.
Yes. The secondary ground is moral excellency or beauty.
Beauty. The text outlines this secondary ground by stating that God is infinitely the most beautiful and excellent being.
Infinitely.
And it makes a fascinating claim about the nature of beauty in the world. It says all the beauty to be found throughout the whole creation is just a reflection of his diffused beams.
Diffused beams.
God is the fountain, he is the sun, and everything else is just the daylight.
The absolute distinction between the source of beauty and the reflection of beauty is critical here.
Break that down for us.
The text asserts that God's beauty is infinitely more valuable than that of all other beings for two specific reasons.
Okay, what are they?
First, the degree of his virtue, and second, the greatness of his being, which we just established.
The infinite mass.
Right. Because he has the most existence and the highest degree of virtue, he's the fountain of all beauty.
Let us expand on that sunbeam idea. Because we as humans, we treat beauty like a standalone object.
We really do.
We look at a painting or a sunset or a kind act, and we think the beauty originates right there in the object.
But beauty, in this framework, is more like a frequency.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, God is the broadcaster. Creation is just the receiver.
So when we love creation without God, we are basically staring at a radio speaker and praising the plastic box for the music.
We think the plastic box is the source.
That is hilarious, but sad.
That is the core human dilemma. The text tells us that God has sufficiently exhibited himself. He has given us faculties to plainly discover his immense superiority.
We can hear the music.
We are capable of seeing that he is the broadcaster. Yet, we constantly fixate on the receiver. We look at the moral beauty in another human being and we stop right there.
We treat the reflection as if it were the source.
We do.
We hug the radio.
We hug the radio. And by focusing strictly on the text's assertion, God is defined as the head of the universal system. He is the fountain.
The sum and comprehension of all existence and excellence.
Yes. When we elevate a created thing, which is just a diffused beam or plastic radio, to the level of the fountain, we are rejecting the true order of the universe.
So a proper view of nature or art or human achievement, according to this framework, is that they are mirrors.
Just mirrors.
They are valuable only insofar as they reflect the divine. They have no intrinsic beauty of their own.
None.
They are completely dependent on the fountain for every single drop of goodness they possess.
They are entirely dependent. The text says God is the one from whom all is perfectly derived and on whom all is most absolutely and perfectly dependent.
If you sever the beam of light from the sun, the light ceases to exist.
Poof. Gone.
Therefore, true virtue must consist in a supreme love to God, because loving the reflection without loving the source is entirely illogical.
That makes no sense.
Okay, I track with the logic, but this raises a massive practical hurdle for me.
What is that?
I am a finite human. I look at this math, right? God has infinite existence and infinite beauty. He is the fountain. But if God is the infinite source and has absolutely no deficits, why does he need my love?
Yes.
I mean, my neighbor actually needs me. My neighbor's hungry. My friend needs a shoulder to cry on.
True.
God does not need my help. So shouldn't my fellow creatures be the most proper objects of my benevolence?
The text anticipates this exact objection. It calls it the profitability objection.
The profitability objection.
The argument goes like this. We cannot be profitable to God. Our goodness cannot extend to him in a way that meets a need. Therefore, we should focus our benevolence on created beings who actually benefit from it.
And how does the author answer this? Because, look, evolutionary biology and psychology wire us for reciprocal altruism.
Sure.
I scratch your back, you scratch mine, I meet your deficit, you meet mine. That is how humans survive.
It is.
So, on a human level, the profitability objection makes perfect sense.
It makes sense to us, but the author answers it by destroying our transactional definition of love.
Destroying it.
Yes. He redefines what it means to exercise benevolence. The text states that a benevolent propensity of heart is exercised not only in seeking to promote the happiness of someone,
Okay.
but also in rejoicing in their happiness.
Rejoicing in their happiness. We think of love as a rescue mission.
Always a rescue mission.
I see someone drowning in debt, I throw them a life preserver of cash. That is love as a response to a deficit.
Right.
But what happens when you encounter someone who is already standing on solid ground, wealthy, healthy, and lacking nothing? How do you love them?
The text says you rejoice in their completeness. You celebrate the fact that they do not need a rescue.
But we struggle with that because human egos are often tied to being the rescuer.
We like feeling useful.
Yes.
We want to be the hero.
The text argues that if someone is above any need of us, true benevolence still dictates that we rejoice in their prosperity.
Even if we cannot add to it.
Right. The author points out a glaring absurdity here. If inability to profit God meant no benevolence was due, it would also mean no gratitude was due. Ooh. Let us trace the mechanics of that because the implications are huge.
Yeah, if you say, I cannot give God anything he needs, therefore I owe him no love.
Right.
You must logically also say, I cannot repay God for what he has given me, therefore I owe him no gratitude.
Because both love and gratitude in that flawed transactional model require an equal exchange of goods.
Exactly.
And since we cannot offer an equal exchange to an infinite being, we are off the hook entirely.
But the text asks, where is the man who believes a God and a providence that will say this?
No one would say that out loud.
Right. Anyone who acknowledges a creator must acknowledge that gratitude is due to him, even if we cannot requite him.
And if gratitude is due, then benevolent affection is due.
You cannot live in a universe void of gratitude without losing your humanity.
Okay, but even if I owe God gratitude, I am still a finite creature. I cannot actually do anything for an infinite being.
Not in a way that fills a lack, no.
My actions do not move the needle for him, do they? The author mentions we can be instruments of promoting his glory. But how does my tiny, finite action promote the infinite?
Well, the text asserts that God takes a true and proper delight in the actions of finite creatures.
A proper delight.
This is a fascinating mechanism. God's delight is not the delight of receiving something he lacked. It is the delight of seeing his own beauty and glory reflected back to him.
Like a mirror.
Like a mirror perfectly angled to catch the sun. When we act as instruments of his glory, we are participating in that system of sunbeams.
We are reflecting the light of the fountain.
Right. The fountain does not need the light to reflect back to be a fountain, but the reflection is the proper, structurally sound order of the system.
So God delights in the structural integrity of his own creation.
Yes.
And the author exposes the glaring inconsistency in secular writers on morality who build these massive philosophical frameworks but completely sideline the deity.
Oh, he calls them out.
He basically points out they are recognizing the system but ignoring the architect.
Yes. He notes that some writers do not wholly exclude God from their moral schemes, but they mention him so slightly that he becomes a subordinate part of morality.
Just a footnote.
Right. They insist on a benevolence to the created system. Loving your neighbor, helping the poor is the most essential thing.
And the text's response to that is, if God is in the system at all, he has to be the head of it.
He has to be.
You cannot acknowledge that God exists, that he has infinite greatness and moral mass, and then treat him like a secondary character.
The logic is inescapable. If he belongs to the whole system of beings, he must be regarded as the chief part of it.
Because of the math.
Because of the math. He is infinitely more than all the rest combined.
Mm.
So to ignore him, or to place human benevolence above benevolence to God, is to act in direct opposition to reality.
This brings us to a severe friction point in the text.
Here we go.
If God must have the absolute, undisputed, supreme spot in our hearts, what happens to the love we feel for our family?
Yeah.
Or our friends? Or our country? I am biologically and socially programmed to prefer my family.
This section is arguably the hardest pill to swallow for modern
It
readers.
really is.
The author introduces the concept of a private system.
A private system.
A private system could be self-love, where your goodwill is confined just to yourself, or it could be a larger circle, your family, your local community, even your entire nation.
But the text states that affection to any private system that is independent of or not subordinate to general benevolence, which we defined earlier as love to God, is not true virtue.
It falls infinitely short.
Infinitely short.
The text details 3 reasons why private affections fail to meet the standard of true virtue.
Let us dig into those.
The first reason is that a private affection, detached from general benevolence, will eventually set a person against general existence. It makes them an enemy to the public good.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. How does loving my kids make me an enemy to the universe?
Well, the text starts with the example of selfishness. If a man is governed entirely by his own private interest, he will act as an enemy to the public whenever his interests clash with the public good.
We all recognize this. If you steal from the community treasury to enrich yourself, everyone agrees you are operating with a base, sordid spirit.
Right, everyone gets that. But the author scales their exact same logic up to family or national love.
He scales it up.
He says if your affection takes in half a dozen more people, your children and family, but still falls infinitely short of the universal system, it exposes you to the exact same structural problem.
Which is?
You will pursue the interest of your particular object, your family, in opposition to general existence whenever a conflict arises.
I see the conflict of interest. If I love my family supremely and I do not care about God's universal order, I might lie, cheat, or steal to advance my family's position.
Yes.
I am still operating with a narrow spirit. It is just a slightly larger circle of selfishness.
The chief good of virtue is that it favors being in general. Private affection, by definition, has a tendency to oppose that general good to protect its own small borders.
That makes sense. The second reason the text gives is that private affection sets up a rival object of supreme regard.
A rival prince.
The author uses a vivid analogy here. He says it is like setting up another prince as supreme in a kingdom, distinct from the lawful sovereign. It naturally tends to enmity against the lawful sovereign.
Right.
Think about a computer operating system.
Right.
If God is the root operating system running the universe, loving your family independently of God isn't just a minor glitch.
Wow.
It is like installing a secondary OS that tries to take over the hardware and overwrite the main drive. It acts like malware. It is systematic treason.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. The private system tries to hijack the processing power of the general system.
The malware tries to run the whole computer.
Yes. The supreme, infinite, all-comprehending being requires a supreme regard to himself. He insists that respect to him should universally rule in our hearts.
Because of his infinite volume.
Right. If you are conscious of this, and yet you choose to set up another prince, whether that prince is your own ego, your spouse, your children, or your country, you are establishing a rival throne.
You cannot have two absolute operating systems fighting for the same hard drive.
You cannot. The text says that continuing in such an act must unavoidably excite enmity and fix us in a stated opposition to the Supreme Being.
So elevating a private affection above general benevolence is treated as an act of moral rebellion.
Yes.
That is staggering. I mean, it completely dismantles things we consider highly moral.
It does.
Philanthropy, patriotism, providing for your children. If those actions operate independently of a supreme love to God, this text labels them as rebellious.
It labels your strongest natural virtue a rebellion.
And that leads to the third reason private affections fail.
Yes, not only do they tend to oppose the supreme object, but in their very nature, they are an instance of great opposition because they subject the supreme object to an inferior one.
They flip the hierarchy.
They put down being in general, which is infinitely superior, into an inferior place.
To use the corporate analogy again, it is taking the partner who owns the entire company
and forcing them to report to the partner who owns the single paperclip.
The rusty paperclip. It acts in direct opposition to the structural reality of the universe.
The author concludes that whoever takes a subject and exalts him above his prince, treats the prince as a subject, and acts the part of an enemy.
Wow.
Any affection whatsoever to any creature, no matter how noble it looks on the outside, if it is not dependent on and subordinate to a union of the heart to God, has zero nature of true virtue.
Zero. But wait, if human love has to be perfectly subordinate to God's order, how does God's own love work?
That is the next logical question.
Does the Creator have to follow his own mathematical rules of virtue, or is he exempt?
He is absolutely not exempt. The philosophy turns its lens upward to the nature of the divine mind.
Okay.
The text asks, if virtue is a propensity of heart toward being in general, according to the measure of existence and beauty, how does the divine mind exercise virtue?
And the text argues that divine virtue consists primarily in God's love for himself.
Yeah.
It describes it as the mutual love and friendship which subsists eternally between the persons in the Godhead.
We have to trace the logic carefully here, building on the premises we already established.
Let us do it.
We agreed that virtue is proportion to moral mass, being, and beauty.
Right.
God has infinitely the greatest share of existence and the highest degree of moral beauty.
Therefore, if God is perfectly virtuous, he must love that which has the greatest existence and beauty supremely.
Yes.
Since he himself possesses the greatest existence and beauty, God must love himself supremely in order to be mathematically and morally correct.
Correct.
But in humans, loving yourself supremely is the very definition of narcissism.
It is.
It is the root of all the private affection problems we just talked about. So is God a narcissist? How does the author reconcile this tension?
The reconciliation lies in the vast difference between the finite and the infinite. Scale.
Yeah.
When a human being loves themselves supremely, they are violating the mathematical rule of virtue. They are taking a tiny, finite, fractional share of existence and valuing it above the infinite whole.
That is the definition of a private, narrow spirit?
Because you are not the center of the universe.
Right.
But when God loves himself supremely, he is loving the infinite whole. He is the center. He is the fountain.
So his self-love is not a private, narrow affection.
No, it is the most expansive, universal affection possible because he comprehends all existence within himself.
Wow.
God's self-love is the purest form of general benevolence. If he loved a finite creature more than he loved his own infinite glory, God would be valuing the finite over the infinite.
Which is mathematically incorrect.
Exactly. It would be an error in the system.
That blows my mind. The exact same action, supreme self-love, is the ultimate sin for a human and the ultimate virtue for God, simply because of the scale of their being.
The text goes further, stating that God's goodness and love to created beings is actually derived from and subordinate to his love to himself.
So when God loves us, it is a byproduct of him loving his own glory.
Yes. And this provides the template for how created beings are supposed to love one another.
The template.
Virtuous love between humans must arise from a temper of mind that loves God supremely. Our love for each other has to coincide with God's end in creation.
Which is the manifestation of God's glory to created understandings, the communication of his infinite fullness.
Yes.
The physical world is just a stage. The text says the inanimate world was made for the moral world, as much as a house is prepared for the inhabitants.
True goodness in a moral agent is agreeing with that design. A truly virtuous mind is under the sovereign dominion of love to God and seeks the glory of God above all things.
It makes this his supreme, governing, and ultimate end.
In everything.
So when I exercise benevolence toward another created being, when I love my neighbor, I am chiefly seeking their good so that they can know God's glory, unite with God, and have joy in him.
Right.
I am not just seeking to make them physically comfortable. I am seeking their ultimate alignment with the fountain of all being.
That disposition of heart, that active consent to being in general, is what the author finally labels as true grace and real holiness. No other disposition or affection, but this is of the nature of true virtue.
This drops a massive hammer on secular philosophy. I mean, if everything we have discussed is true, the corollary at the end of the text exposes a fatal defect in how modern society operates.
The corollary is absolute.
It is.
It states that any scheme of religion or moral philosophy that does not lay supreme regard to God as the foundation and handle all other virtues in subordination to it is fundamentally and essentially defective.
The author writes that however well these secular schemes might treat of benevolence to mankind, however nice they seem, however much money they raise for the poor, if they do not have a supreme regard to God, they are not true schemes of philosophy. They possess nothing of the nature of true virtue or religion in them.
Nothing.
Think about a modern philanthropist who gives away billions of dollars to cure a terrible disease.
Okay.
They build hospitals, they eradicate suffering, the whole world applauds them as a hero. But this philanthropist has no regard for God. They do not acknowledge the Creator. According to this text, that person possesses nothing of the nature of true virtue.
Modernity judges the action by the material result.
The hospital was built, therefore, the action is virtuous.
But Edwards judges the action by its alignment with universal reality.
It comes back to structural integrity.
Yes, you cannot build a structurally sound house on a denied reality.
Right. You can build walls that look beautiful. You can paint the rooms. You can put in nice furniture. That is the secular benevolence, the philanthropy, the hospitals.
Looks like a good house.
But the text argues that the foundation itself is compromised. If the foundation is a private affection, even one as large as the entire human race, it is still infinitely short of universal existence.
It is still a rival prince.
So no matter how much good that philanthropist does horizontally for mankind, vertically, they are engaged in an act of cosmic treason by elevating humanity above the infinite being.
The action lacks its proper source and its proper end.
The text ends by asserting that nothing is of the nature of true virtue, in which God is not the first and the last.
The Alpha and the Omega.
If an action does not have its first source in the apprehension of God's supreme dignity, and its final end in respect to God, it is empty of true goodness.
We have covered incredible philosophical ground today.
We really have. We started by noting how comfortable it is to view morality as a horizontal ledger, just being nice to fellow humans, holding doors, giving to charity.
We love the ledger because it is a system we can control and measure.
But the text forces us to abandon the ledger entirely. It moves us to a morality based on mathematical proportion and structural reality.
We have to weigh our love against the infinite volume of existence and the blinding reality of the fountain of all beauty.
It requires a supreme, total alignment with the creator of all being, to the point where even our love for our own families must be subordinate to our love for him, lest we establish a rival prince in our hearts.
It requires recognizing that we live in a house prepared for inhabitants, and the purpose of the inhabitants is to reflect the glory of the architect.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own today.
Something to chew on.
Yes, it builds right on the tension we have been wrestling with this whole time. If true virtue requires our love to be proportioned precisely to the amount of being and beauty something possesses,
Right.
and we are finite creatures with highly limited attention spans, how do you practically go about your Tuesday loving your family, doing your job, enjoying a meal, without letting those temporary horizontal things eclipse the infinite vertical being behind them?
That is the daily friction of living out this philosophy.
It really is. Thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us as the third person in the room for this deep dive on reform thinking. We will see you next time.